what is this individuality? See? Well, that's why it is referred to as Samavesha. The one who recognizes that fully. One who recognizes that this was always Shiva in disguise. In disguise, so as to allow that point of view on infinity, so that the infinity can be contemplated. You see? There's nothing one then wants to discard or can discard or need to discard. And so this is in a way, now another hint, that's where individuality goes. And what remains? True individuality. False identity is gone, and the true identity remains. See? And that is Samavesha.
So my question is relating to a deep state that I entered about 2 weeks ago, and also to the theme of Samavesha as well. But about 2 weeks ago, I was in meditation, and I was just in this expansive field. And then there was a kind of like almost a doorway opening, like between two lines in a way of light. I can't remember if it was dark inside light or light inside dark. And I simply entered through this, and then I was gone. And I didn't even know I was gone until I was sucked back into the body, and with like a gasp of air as if I was coming up to the surface of deep ocean. And I don't think I was there for very long at all, but I had no sense of sound or no sense of anything at that point. But since then, and after that, I could tell, I knew it was a blessing. I could feel that, and just how I was in body and how I was moving around. And I told to Ralph, I sat in my car, and when I turned the ignition, it felt like it was the first time driving ever. It was this amazing feeling, like everything was new again. But since then in meditation, although I can enjoy this expansive field, it's hard to go back to the innocent curiosity that allowed me to enter that space. And so the question is really, because I've heard from your talks before about entering this state where it's not so needed actually to go into this state where you're no longer in the body, where I maybe didn't describe it exactly like that, but the expansive awareness states are conducive, they're easier to integrate, and so on and so forth. But I felt rising a certain fear to go there again, as well as a curiosity again. So the two have just been playing a little bit within my field of awareness whenever I enter the state of meditation. And so my question is really whether it's like how to be with this now, because I can feel that the states are still deepening. The field is still thickening, and the coming out of meditation is incredible feeling. At the same time, it's kind of become a little bug in my awareness a bit, and I never felt like I chased any states previously. I never had any feeling like I need to go into Samadhi or anything like that. I don't even call it that really, because I'm just there and wherever, but somehow I got a taste of something, and now it's like something opened up. And the question related to Samavesha, because last year you told me I should look into it and become an expert into this subject, and I did read your book, and I have understood the basic principles of it. But I found it difficult to relate it to my own process. So although I had deep states in meditation, there wasn't so much, drama or anything like that. I haven't experienced anything outside so much. I just come back into myself, and I'm just as I am, actually, as kind of strange and weird as I am, which is perfect for me. But I just feel like I wonder if I'm missing something, and the only thing that I can possibly relate to is when I look in the mirror and there's no one there. So I look into my own eyes, and Daisy's gone. But and then on a bigger scale, when I'm living my life, I can't go against what is the alignment that's happening in me. So I just wanted to know how the two relate, Samadhi, Samavesha, and this lived experience. And if it's even a dilemma at all, actually.
Well, it's not a dilemma, but it certainly gives us an opportunity to bring greater clarity. This, what you have shared with regard to the first two questions, but actually there are two, as you have outlined them, Samadhi and Samavesha. But there is also the third one, right? That I'm not there, right? That what's the reformation of that identity? What is the reconfiguration of that identity, that personal identity? I think this invites us to revisit this. And it also somehow inevitably, indeed, as you have pointed out, linked to the main theme of the immersion itself. So I'll give it a few reflections in layers for you to see how it all connects together, how it all sits together. First, with regard to Samadhi itself, with regard to that experience of being gone, with regard to that experience which you refer to also kind of as a bug, like, what is it? Is it possible to re-enter that? And of course, for everyone else, the reference given to the distinction between Nirvikalpa and Savikalpa samadhis, the two principal samadhis, Samadhi with some kalpa and Samadhi without any kalpa. In other words, Samadhi with some mental modification still, because the mind distinguishes sounds, right? Some kind of partially aware of the environment. Whereas in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, all this ceases, and the absorption, therefore, is spoken of as that coveted, deepest absorption. So there are more samadhis, of course. Technically speaking, there are 4, but the other 2 are on the way to samadhi. So therefore, if we are to summarize them, really there are only 2 samadhis proper. Well, maybe a little bit, if we can give, that one can be identified as the third type of samadhi, which will be very close to deep sleep, which is also experienced by meditators, and often either confused with the experience of shunya, if they have that background, because it has that deep black nothingness about it, or if someone is not aware of that, then it will be experienced as basically as if one falling asleep, and one would be wondering like, oh, I'm like not meditating, I'm falling asleep. But it's a form of samadhi, because samadhi and deep sleep, as you recall, right? You remember this? Some of you may remember. They are similar states, because deep sleep is also a state of absorption. The main difference between deep sleep and samadhi of this kind is that though both are absorptions, in a deep sleep we fall into the unconscious. So in other words, we, as it were, not aware Of course we are aware, but we are not aware to the degree of having this except as a recollection that there was nothing. Whereas in Samadhi, that is accompanied by luminous awareness of nothingness. See, the difference is one is opaque, dark, black, and another one is luminous, lit. So, is it required? Well, I feel that in your unfoldment right now, you would have access to these samadhis more frequently without hankering for it. They will become almost as a necessity if there is this necessity, because frankly speaking, it has many, many benefits. Well spoken, well recorded, well acknowledged, as well as those that are spoken behind kind of closed doors, what really these samadhis afford. Above all else, of course, is this deep absorptions, this what indeed gives complete and utter sense of renewal. Complete. Sometimes it can be at the expense of almost like, even if for a short fraction of time, having to relearn certain skills. For example, it is very well known that in settings and situations where advanced meditative programs developed, people are not advised driving cars, because one can come out of those states not fit to drive, really, because cognitive responses may be impeded, not as acute. Whereas in inferior in inverted commas, we should take it with a pinch of salt, Samadhi with some activity, some background, that Savikalpa Samadhi, right? Or asamprajnata and samprajnata in some schools it is referred to. It is easier to function because though one is in a state of absorption, one's faculties are not switched off completely. So therefore the faculties themselves get saturated with that state, and coming out of that samadhi, one can function there and then. In fact, often more with greater awareness, with greater acuity, with greater body-mind coordination. I have noticed that myself. The Savikalpa Samadhi was experienced regularly when I was just doing the TM as that kind of like twice a day on a therapeutic basis for a number of years, 5 years. I remember very well, like you come out of meditation, for instance, and you go to the kitchen to fix yourself something, and a spoon or a knife or a cup falls and you just catch it without even knowing that you did it. It's just like, oh, that's cool. Put it there. That body-mind coordination is just really perform some fits. Whereas coming out of this deep absorption will be opposite. You're trying to pour yourself a cup of tea and you're making a mess in the kitchen, you know, so you kind of like, you need to really, okay, I'm doing the tea now. Where's the teapot? Oh, that's not a teapot, that's a...
That's me anyway.
Something else. So, you see, it has some kind of, but I'm exaggerating this, although it could easily happen, and does happen. But the sense of renewal, of course, the sense of novelty, it's like everything wiped clean, sparkling clean. So that what you described is unmistakable. It's like renewed reality, renewed experience. I want to tell something to you, kind of like running ahead of time, is that when the samadhi stabilizes and when this becomes spontaneous, involuntary samadhi, the Sahaj Samadhi, as inevitably with the rise of Kundalini, it's bound to happen, because this is what you are destined to experience if you're smart, intelligent, vigilant, and persistent. Because, well, maybe it's another kind of conversation, but, you know, I just have the feeling that some people, they meant to make it, and they will make it, because the circumstances falling into place. In Sahaj Samadhi, this is happening all the time. It's like reality is renewed, and this is what I was trying to touch upon in the Chamatkara. You know, that there is this sense of wonder. The Chamatkara is that. Chamatkara and Samavesha are closely interrelated. We'll speak about it in the discourses. In a way, there is another term used by Tantrikas of Trika Śaivism. They use the term Samavesha with regard to the one who is liberated in the body. You know the term Jivan Mukta, right? A classical kind of term that is used in yogic vocabulary. But Samavesha is with regard to the one where the goddess took over, completely and utterly. So of course there are degrees of that absorption. We'll speak about that again, so I don't want to kind of run ahead of time, but pertinent to these exchanges, so this sense of renewal, you know, the perpetual sense of wonder, you see, is by far more, if you will, important than going into these deep absorptions where the seeds of all the impressions are entirely and utterly roasted. So this is one of the key, maybe, benefits from deep absorptions, because in these deeper absorptions, all that what you refer to as Daisy is gone is experienced, because the identity is always a conglomerate. And I would like to add immediately here, foreseeing someone, one of you will be bringing the topic of Kundalini back into the conversation, that there is no such thing as identity without the agency of Kundalini. This is the biggest mistake. This is where the biggest shortcoming of today's spiritual conversation about Kundalini, speaking about it as something happening to me, something happening in me. This is just a wrong perspective from get-going. And that's why it causes so much confusion. There is only one power behind identity, and that is the goddess, that is Kundalini. So whether Daisy remains or Daisy is gone is in check by that one power. By that one power. It's the power of awareness, the power of Shiva to conceal and reveal itself. In a way, we can speak about Kundalini only in these terms. It's self-revealing and self-concealing power of Shiva. That's what Kundalini is. Kundalini proper, that is. Not Kundalini as some kind of process, as it's now reduced to. Reduced to the piece of furniture, as I said earlier, like a lamp on the table. Right? With the name Kundalini. It's fun. I mean, it's the good because you plug it in and you switch the thing and it lights. So it's like, it's functional lighting and it has a fancy name. So, release that going into deeper samadhi as to repeat that experience, and as soon as you do, then that's granted, because this works that way. Soon as you reach out to something, then what you touch is the mirror. See? You reach towards something and you put your hand through it. You either touch the cold surface of the mirror, or like Alice in the Wonderland, you have the danger of going on the other side of the mirror. You know, like, what for? You don't need to do that. It belongs to another school of thought, Bimba Pratibimba. You don't want to go there, right? Alice in the Wonderland, right? And Alice behind the looking glass, right? Why to go there? No need. So that's with regard to the experience of that deep absorption. And the Samavesha, the exchanges we had, and my encouragement to you to look into this as a performer, right, with regard to this, and your honest admonition that it doesn't work in a sense of when you come out of meditation, you come out to act as an individual. So this is where you need to be very, very attentive. It is very, very subtle here. So no one is going to come out anywhere as a different person. There's no need for that. Unless, of course, we talk about some undesirable pathological examples of multiple personalities, the multiple personality disorder. But we will leave it out, because obviously in that case there would have to be a great work done to bring that into one, because it's not just diplopia, it's a multiple diplopia. The multiple personality disorder would need to be brought into that, what would be more or less, at least brought to two personalities. I just want this to serve as a reminder that we always have two personalities, and it's healthy, psychologically speaking. We have the internal concept of ourselves, internal dimension, and we have the face that we wear to the world. So let's not lie about that. It's a very, very, in a way, in many schools of psychology, this is considered to be normal state of affairs. We develop strategies when we grow up, and those of us who are more successful in that become more successful in life per se. So as to retain that sense of individual identity, what I am, in other words, having face, you see? We can extend that, those of you who have watched Shogun or not, the series that is released, right? They touched up on that. It's beautiful, very, it's really, truly commendable how well that adaptation is made. So that face to the world and face that how I'm perceiving myself, right, is an honest thing. So it's not two personalities, although it could become two personalities, and the danger that the world that we live in right now, particularly the digitized world, of creating an entire narrative out there, out of the conglomerate of the social media work, where we want to be perceived in a certain way. So this is where that fine line can be crossed, and eventually there'll be price to pay for that. Because in constructing that, I'm just adding this is not relevant to you, unless you will take some of it into and incorporate in the way you want to, but this is for the room in general. Do you see why that is prone to some undesirable results? When the construction of that personality, outer personality, which is for the world, you see, deliberately for the world, through social media, that our children now are asked, fostered, encouraged to do all the time. If the balance is lost, it will be at the expense of the inner development of that inner face for myself. You see? This is a very important dilemma for us. For us, but those of us who were lucky to grow up before that age may kind of have already been immune to that. Some immunity is developed. But in those in whom psyche is in a more malleable state of development, this could result in some detrimental deformation, or detrimental for healthy psychological state, because it will be at the expense of deformation of that balance between the inner and outer personality. Awakening, of course, bridges and brings and consumes all dualities. We know that. And we know that when Kundalini rises, what it does, it gobbles down the polarities, annihilates polarities, the gender polarities, the polarities of energetic quality, where the gender itself derives from, the soul and the lunar, right? That fire that consumes it all, right? That fire of Bhairavi. And so that fire, of course, also consumes the both personalities, the inner and the outer. So temporarily, the proper Kundalini process is known for phases at least, when the consummation is so complete that one is faceless. There is this phase of being faceless. And of course, depending on how much of that psychological development took place, in other words, how much of ahamkara, healthy ahamkara there is, which will be able to hold it, this could result in undesirable deterioration of the container here. And this would then require its reconstruction. But the reconstruction takes place anyway in the phases of assimilation and in the phases immediately upon the repose, when the journey is complete. And that repose is accompanied by return, right? But in another wave of the descent. So in this, again, all this orchestrated by the pranic currents, the grace descending power that awakens the power of the fire, and then that fire of consummation of the Kundalini, and then followed by the descent to reclaim the personality now, which, depending on how the process went fully, there will be no personality per se, although it will display all the outer aspects of the personality. You see, in some phases before the witnessing state is gone, when witnessing state remain, you would hear yourself speaking and just wondering who is speaking. You construct perfect sentences depending on which school you went, because all this retained there. The full unplugging did not take place. It's enough to unplug to 70%, and rewiring then will take care for formation of new associations. So therefore, some of the principal associations that were formed in the first years of life will remain, most likely. Those principal ones, right? Walking up perfectly, being able to grasp, being able to respond, speech, this, that, all formed within the first 3 years of life. And then the development of the next phase after the 3 until the age of approximately 7, 8. All this most likely will be retained. And it is good if it is retained. Everything that otherwise that comes with the adolescence, with that stage of the original fall, might be wiped clean. And then the personality will be reconstructed. So that reconstruction of that personality is a very interesting phenomenon, because when there is this understanding that one would not be under the pangs of insecurity, that I've gone through all this only to become again who I was. You see? So in a way, then it's like people then capitulate into and became hostages of the non-duality. Because they think, well, there was nothing, this was just a phenomenon. Kundalini itself was a phenomenon, what a waste of time. But this is because something did not quite integrate it in the system fully. So the witnessing state, of course, here is witnessing everything, witnessing yourself responding. Someone said to you this and you're full of sweetness and you're surprised, or maybe not surprised. If you're a sweet person, you're not surprised. Someone said to you something that comes in dissonance and you just told them F off, for example, and you're like, oh wow, Daisy, that's new. Where is that coming from? Well, never mind, let's get on with it, you know. So, but it's just that. Something moves through you. I'm giving extreme examples. But the witnessing, when witnessing is gone, then you can't tell whether this is, well, just try to imagine, you know, when the witnessing is gone, how it feels. When the witnessing is gone, there's no such thing as mindfulness and all that power of now, all that. There's nothing, none of that. None of that. You know, what is sacred, what is profane, which part of the body up, which part of the body down, you know. Like, it just feels completely and utterly natural. Maybe this is what referred to becoming children again. You know, there's this innocence of, you know, yeah, that's hand, okay, you know, that's my belly, you know, that's my head, you know, that's my dinghy, you know, like, so it's like all part the same thing, you know, and it's wonderful and that's extraordinary. Some parts do this, other parts do that. You witness how the little kids, you know, like, Daddy, you know, I want to do caca, you know, close the door. No, don't close the door this time. Just stand, watch me. No, I don't want to watch you, darling. I want to go do my things. It's a private time. Okay, I'll call you when I'm done. You know, so it's like this, nothing is sinister about that. So of course, if we start making a big deal, we start introducing ideas. So now, back to this. Samavesha is linked to this, and I don't want you to think or assume that it will feel that you always embody the goddess, okay? I don't want you to think somehow or come under the impression that there will be this continued kind of embodiment of the goddess. Because in a way, let's be humbled by these experiences. Maybe there's something about it that because of the rarity of that, and because of that is entering that state of Samavesha. You see? Entering that state is what makes it so unique and special. Both in terms of completing the process of self-recognition, because it's not you, Daisy, that recognizes yourself. You see? We will speak about it tomorrow on in a day discourse, on a fresh, as it were, head and mind, and you know, so as to make it very clear the distinction of types and degrees of what is known as penetrations. See, these piercings. So as to understand where we do something and where something is done to us, so that there is this process is understood from two respective positions, because all this is linked to the point of reference. Of course, in most of this kind of discourses, the point of reference is always the body. Has to be, because this is where and how we relate to everything. We do our best to give the reference from the point of view of consciousness. But how effective that is? How can one give a POV of consciousness? Consciousness does not have POV. The POV of consciousness is the body. This is the logical conclusion, and a very accurate one. How can you know the magnanimity of the ocean if not through the limitation of the wave? In the homogeneity of the ocean, there is no point of view. The point of view only comes when the shore is far there and that shore is not even visible. That's what we call POV. There's no POV in Shambhu. There's no POV in Shiva. None. This becomes the POV. So this is why we speak with reference to that and we build from there. So this Samavesha, it's repeated entrance into this, where it's not it's as a role in a way, but role that is entered to such degree that the character completely and utterly takes over. And guess what? Some of these roles pre-exist you and I. They're archetypal roles. They were played by so many different actors, by countless characters, countless actors. So when that role is landed, you see, for you, it's not like you're going to perform it for the very first time, because you're not playing just someone next door neighbor. You're not playing just, I don't know. Yeah, you don't playing just like a regular character. You are now embodying the archetypal force. So that character exists, and pre-existed maybe the theater itself, the actors. Extend that metaphor now. So when you give yourself to that role, as it were, has its own energy, has its own power. It takes you over by virtue of you simply giving yourself to that archetypal role, and then it takes over. This is the principle which is employed in all shamanic work. In all shamanic work, in all shamanic activity, one way or another, because the shamanic work is pre-religious. It goes before. It's a very, very, very archaic form. And there are some propositions that were made by various scholars that, in a way, a revival of Tantrism in India in itself was a renaissance or kind of revival of these much more primordial, primal forms that goes back to the time before even Vedic civilization, where these principal deities, Shiva and Shakti, perhaps known under different names, were interacted and played as that ultimate form of repossession, as that ultimate form of Samavesha. So Tantra's revival in India per se, not just Tantric Shaivism in particular, but revival of Tantra, because Tantra went across the entire India, everywhere, down in the south, Tamil Nadu, the Shaiva Siddhanta, the different dualistic schools, non-dualistic schools. So this shamanic work, we could find echoes in so many different cultures where through one form of a ritual or another, an adept enters that state. Not that shaman, female or male, but by the way, there were many, many cultures where shamans were female, not male. The word shaman, in fact, is genderless, effectively speaking. Certainly in Central Asia, in Mongolia, for example, that this is very well known, that shamans were women. Entering that state where one gives one's entire individuality for that archetypal force to enter and possess and take over, so that one is then empowered by that force, which is incomparably greater than anything that one can come up with in terms of summoning up one's reserves, one's resources, because the resources here are no longer linked to personalized psychology. The personalized psychology has been overrun, you see? So, and then in that, something begins to enact itself. How one gets into that state? Well, each tribe, each region had their own ways. Through dance, through music, through singing, through movement, through recitation, through, they made different ones. So, it's not that Samavesha is where you are entering that and remaining in that. You see? When that state wanes, you, as it were, being released back to function into that currently embodied individuality. So therefore, it shouldn't be seen as a sort of like incapacity. Examples were given also in a lighter manner with regard to this poet and the muse, relationship of a poet and a muse, relationship of an artist and muse, where the poet knows it's not up on his creativity. Some poets were very clever. One can construct poetry, construct as one would construct architecture. One learned the rules of poetry. There are rules of poetry. In fact, the easiest form of poetry is based on rhyming. Rhyming, and they all have names, depending on how many lines where that rhyme reappears. But the true poetry actually disregards the rhyming. It implements cadence of what the internal structure of the sound of the words invokes, and one taps into that melody. And this is poet has no access to that on his or her own. This is considered to be the working of the muse. So you see, but the principle is the very same. It's the same principle. I knew that very well. I didn't have words for it. I didn't have philosophy for it. But I knew that in the way of making a work of art, engaging in that act, there has to be this moment when one ceases to be so-and-so and the process entirely takes over, to such degree that one is taken for a ride. And literally it feels as being possessed. Sometimes it is accompanied by you are alone in the studio and you have these sensations as if you're going to go on stage performing. Like this, the blood pressure is rising. There's this kind of like this excitement is rising here. It's like almost stage fright. And very quickly I learned that this is good. This is good, not to be somehow disregarded, abandoned, questioned. Roll with it. And the most interesting things happen when one gives oneself that license for being taken over. So this is just tweaking that what we have spoken so that you don't somehow set this unreachable goal or doubt this capacity. You see? So then just to tie it in with that that individuality, right? I don't know, you did say that, I don't know if this is question or not, right? That feeling, sensing that Daisy is gone, right? And at the same time, she's not gone, right? She's here functioning, she's engaged, functioning. So this is already, you yourself should be able to intuit that this is where the whole dynamic is. So this is where you, in a way, rediscover your true individuality. So in that Shaiva understanding, that trinity of Shiva, Shakti, Nara, right? In that trinity, the deepest revelation is that Nara, individual, is Shiva in disguise. So that's the greatest of Samaveshas, that's the greatest of overtakings. So if one reflects on this enough, one bound to arrive to extraordinary, because it's a paradox. It's a paradox that, of course, this paradox here made apparent into somatic experience through the rise of Shakti. Only Kundalini can give this a visceral sense. Everything else will be intellectual modifications of that relationship. But reflecting of this has no harm for anyone. Not everyone is destined to go through full Kundalini process in this lifetime. This should also be very, very clearly understood. For some, it will be actually not desirable. For others, this a must. But having an activated pranic field, right, and losing few samskaras and vasanas, we are better off without, also goes without saying. So this is why I'd like to keep the conversation in that direction. So now, you see, reflect on this. So where would the personality go? Okay, clinically speaking, you understand this as a rewiring. Rewiring, because this is what happens neurophysiologically. But of course, it's only that clinical perspective. And then we would have to, of course, implement a profound level of understanding how then what this body is and why Tantra unapologetically chooses the stand that body is divine. So the culmination of the process is not in self-recognition, but in divinization of the body. See, this is the work of Sri Aurobindo, who proposed that if there is new spirituality, if there is a new merging coming, he was speaking about this merging of two paths, the lower path and the higher path. This is what Sri Aurobindo Ghosh was talking about in his work. In his letters on yoga, in his, of course, in a poetic way, in his Savitri. This necessity. He spoke about it as a necessity. Because he already foresaw how the currently adopted materialistic view, scientific view, is going to make us more and more move further and further away from who we are, from our nature. In a way, echoing Heideggerian prophecy that technology taking us further away from being. So, but what is this individuality? See? Well, that's why it is referred to as Samavesha. The one who recognizes that fully. One who recognizes that this was always Shiva in disguise. In disguise, so as to allow that point of view on infinity, so that the infinity can be contemplated. You see? There's nothing one then wants to discard or can discard or need to discard. And so this is in a way, now another hint, that's where individuality goes. And what remains? True individuality. False identity is gone, and the true identity remains. See? And that is Samavesha. So one can step into that at any time. So you can step into that through ritual, through this and that, but when you are an adept, you literally walk into it like this side of the road or that side of the road. Choose which one you want to walk. You want to behave as a human being, nobody will tell apart. You're not going to frighten anyone. You're perfect in conversation, normal. And in a split second, without even blink of an eye, you are God. And even the word God is like pregnant with mental concepts. You are simply that. And there is no paradox, because that paradox has been reconciled by Kundalini. By that, what holds all the reins of individuality. So you see, if you followed attentively, there was never an individuality in the first place. Never. That is also Samavesha.